What if Aristotle's forbidden verdict wasn't buried in the past, but aimed at Trump? Tonight you'll hear why he called Trump the balance, a truth so dangerous it was censored. Before we dive in, hit subscribe right now, because this revelation won't survive without you. The auditorium was restless before he even appeared. The rumor had spread far beyond the city. Aristotle had spoken words so dangerous, so unthinkable, that even the reporters covering him refused to print them. The words were whispered in corners, repeated like a forbidden mantra. He called Trump the balance. When Aristotle walked out, silence fell like a curtain. He looked not like a relic of ancient Greece, but like a judge pulled through centuries to deliver a verdict no one wanted to hear. His eyes burned as he began. "Do you know why they silence me?" he asked, his voice low, deliberate, cutting. "Because I did not call Trump a tyrant. I did not call him a savior. I called him what he is, the balance." The audience shifted uneasily. Balance. The word itself sounded blasphemous. Some leaned forward, others recoiled, but Aristotle pressed on. "In every age when power tilts too far toward the few, a force emerges to correct it. Not always noble, not always pure, but always inevitable. Trump is not justice. Trump is not wisdom. Trump is the weight thrown onto the scale that the elites refuse to keep even." Gasps spread through the crowd. Some muttered angrily, others whispered in awe. "Understand this," Aristotle thundered. "The elites created an empire of arrogance. They built towers of wealth, sneered at the poor, mocked their pain, and silenced their cries. And nature, yes, political nature itself, abhors imbalance. The people's rage required a vessel, and Trump became that vessel. That is why I call him the balance. He is the inevitable correction to their contempt." Reporters scribbled furiously, but many hesitated, as if publishing such words would mark them as heretics. "Do not mistake me," Aristotle continued. "Balance is not virtue. Balance is not peace. A storm may balance the heat of summer, but it leaves ruin in its wake. Trump's rise is not a gift, it is a warning that when leaders abandon the many will embrace the one who promises vengeance, no matter how flawed." A woman in the front row stood up shouting, "So you defend him?" Aristotle's reply was instant, sharp as steel. "I defend the truth, and the truth is this: you made him necessary. The elites mocked the people, and the people chose the one man who mocked the elites back. That is balance, brutal, imperfect, and forbidden to admit, but it is balance nonetheless." The hall buzzed with tension. Some cheered, others hissed, but no one left unmoved. Aristotle raised his voice one last time. "You may censor me, you may bury these words, but you cannot erase the law of balance. Ignore the poor, and they will raise a storm. Mock the people, and they will crown their vengeance. That is why Trump exists. He is not the disease, he is the symptom of imbalance you refuse to cure." The lights dimmed. Aristotle disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind not applause, but a heavy, dangerous silence. For the forbidden words had been spoken. Trump, the balance, the mechanics of balance. The second night came with a heavier silence. The whispers had already spread far beyond the hall. Aristotle called Trump the balance. Some were outraged, others intrigued, but all were unsettled. Tonight they returned not just to hear a philosopher, but to confront a heresy. Aristotle entered without pause, his face grim, his stride deliberate. He spoke as though he had no time for pleasantries, only for judgment. "You misunderstand me," he said, his voice low, almost mournful. "When I call him the balance, I do not speak of justice. I do not speak of virtue. I speak of inevitability." The crowd stiffened. "In my time, I taught that every system seeks equilibrium. When wealth piles too high in one corner, unrest piles just as high in the other. When leaders mock the many will grasp at any hand that promises to strike back. That hand may be clumsy, it may be reckless, but it will be chosen, because balance is never optional, it is forced. He stepped closer to the audience, eyes sharp. Trump is not noble. He is not wise. He is the weight dropped on the other side of the scale. A counterforce against elites who believed their arrogance could go unanswered. He is the scream of the poor made flesh. That is why he exists. That is why I call him the balance. A murmur spread, half in agreement, half in disgust. Aristotle raised his hand to silence them. Do not mistake balance for harmony, he warned. A storm balances the drought, but it does not bless the farmer. A plague balances overpopulation, but it does not bless the city. Trump balances the arrogance of the elites, but he does not heal the people. He is the backlash, not the cure. The hall grew tense, breaths shallow. Do you ask why the poor rally to him? Aristotle thundered. Because for decades they cried, and no one answered. They shouted about jobs lost, towns hollowed, dignity stolen, and they were mocked as backward, laughed at as ignorant. Then came a man who mocked the mockers, who spat back at the elites. He gave them a voice of vengeance, and though he did not build them bread, he gave them fire. Fire is not food, fire does not nourish, but in the cold of contempt, fire feels like salvation. He paused, scanning faces that flickered between shame and fury. This is the forbidden truth, Aristotle continued. The elites created him. Their corruption, their hypocrisy, their detachment forged the very chains they now pretend to resist. They fear him not because he is monstrous, but because he is their mirror. He shows them what their neglect has birthed. His voice grew softer, heavier. But the poor, too, must beware, for balance is not blessing. It can correct, and it can destroy. A force unleashed in rage can topple the tower, but it can also crush the very people who unleashed it. That is why Trump is dangerous, not because he is balance, but because balance born of rage leaves wreckage behind. The audience sat frozen. Some shook their heads in denial, others wiped tears of recognition. Reporters scribbled furiously, though many knew their editors would never dare print such words. Aristotle's final words echoed like thunder. You cannot censor nature. You cannot silence imbalance. If you will not govern with virtue, balance will rise against you. But balance without virtue does not heal, it scars. And unless you learn this lesson, your nation will trade arrogance for vengeance and still collapse beneath both. He turned, walking off stage into the shadows once again. And this time the silence was not just heavy, it was terrified. For the people realized they had not been given a prophecy of hope, but a warning of ruin. The ruin of false justice. By the third night, the atmosphere had changed. The first crowd had come curious, the second conflicted, but now the hall felt like a courtroom awaiting its sentence. Protesters outside screamed for silence, defenders demanded more. Inside, everyone braced for a verdict they already feared. Aristotle walked onto the stage slower than before, as if carrying centuries on his shoulders. He did not begin with fury, he began with sorrow. You have heard me call Trump the balance, he said, his voice calm, measured, deliberate. You have heard me say he is not virtue, but inevitability. Tonight you must hear the last truth. Balance by rage is not justice, it is ruin. The room froze. In Athens, I watched the poor turn against the rich and the rich crush the poor in return. Each side claimed balance. Each side called itself the correction of the other. But what they created was not harmony. It was civil war. And Athens fell, not because of foreign enemies, but because we mistook vengeance for virtue. He looked out at the sea of faces, his gaze like a torch. And now I see America making the same mistake. Trump's rise was balance, yes, but balance born of anger, not of wisdom. His enemies fall because they were arrogant. His followers rise because they are bitter. But neither side builds, both only destroy. And destruction, no matter how righteous it feels, leaves only ashes. A restless murmur spread. Aristotle raised his hand, and the hall obeyed. "Do you understand what happens when a nation feeds on this cycle?" he thundered. "The elites grow richer in chaos, the leaders grow louder in rage, and the people grow weaker in silence. Families are divided, neighbors become enemies, truth itself becomes impossible to find. And when that day comes, no constitution, no flag, no leader can save you. A nation devoured from within has no defenders." He paused, letting the silence stretch like a blade over the crowd. "Trump is not your healer. His enemies are not your saviors. He is balance, yes, but balance born of rage is only a storm. And storms do not build, they break. They tear down towers and shacks alike, leaving ruins for the next generation to crawl through. If you confuse this destruction for justice, you will inherit nothing but dust." A woman near the front whispered through tears, "Then what hope do we have?" Aristotle's voice softened, but it cut even deeper. "Hope lies in virtue. Hope lies in refusing the theater of vengeance. Balance by rage must give way to balance by justice. Laws that are fair, leaders who are humble, people who see one another not as enemies but as citizens. Without this, you are condemned to the fate of Athens, of Rome, of every empire that mistook spectacle for salvation." The crowd sat frozen. Some trembled, others clenched their fists. But none could deny the weight of the words. Aristotle's final statement was like a stone dropped into the ocean. The forbidden truth is this: Trump's existence proves your imbalance, his power proves your arrogance, and your obsession with him proves your blindness. If you do not choose virtue, you will not survive the balance. You will be consumed by it. He stepped back, disappearing into the shadows one final time. The hall did not erupt in applause. It did not roar with anger. It simply sat in silence, as if mourning a nation still alive, but already digging its grave. Outside, the noise of protesters had quieted. Even they seemed unsettled by the echo that lingered. Trump, the balance. But balance by rage is not justice. It is the beginning of the end. Aristotle's forbidden verdict was never about glorifying Trump. It was about exposing us. He called him the balance not because of virtue, but because imbalance always demands correction. When the elites abandoned the people, rage filled the vacuum, and Trump became its vessel. But balance born of rage is not justice. It is a storm. And storms leave nothing but ruins behind. That is the warning we cannot ignore. The question is simple. Will we keep mistaking vengeance for virtue, or will we finally demand leaders of humility, laws of fairness, and a people united not by anger, but by purpose? If this truth struck you, don't let it end here. Subscribe now so this message cannot be buried. Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to know if you believe America can survive its own imbalance. And share this video with someone who still thinks rage alone can heal a nation. Because balance without virtue destroys, and survival begins with you.